Hey, I'm Bradley McCone, and this here is Graham Cracker, and we just recently bought him to be a rodeo horse for our little girl, and she is 6 years old. And we knew he was a little bit older when we bought him. He's a pretty good horse. It's kind of why we got him. This is her first full year rodeoing. When he got here, we took him to the vet to get updated vaccines and get his teeth floated, and come to find out he's quite a bit older than what we were originally told he is, which it's not a big deal. Just for a little reference, we've got two other horses out here. They're both 11. Their entire lives, all they've ever eaten is grass in the spring and summer and hay in the fall and winter. They've never had grain, never been supplemented. They get routine vet care, and they're both extremely healthy. So I hate to admit it, but I was kind of not knowledgeable on how to feed a older horse. So talking with the vet, came up with a good plan on what we can give him that it will make him the most efficient. One, make him the most efficient at digesting and absorbing all the nutrients that he needs, and make him the most efficient at rodeoing what little performance he's going to be doing. Like I said, our little girl's 6, so it's not like he's trying to qualify for the NFR. And I will go over and show you what all we're feeding him and why we're feeding it to him. Whenever he came to us, he was eating sweet feed. He was getting sweet feed twice a day. I'm guessing probably about 4 pounds a day, probably 2 pounds in the morning and 2 pounds in the evening. So we're going to try to wean him off the sweet feed over a week, 2 weeks time frame onto just all equine senior. This is the scooper that I use to measure out his feed. So like I said, he was eating sweet feed twice a day. So what we're doing is I'm going to give him half a scoop of the sweet feed, half a scoop of some equine senior. He's getting 1 full scoop of beet pulp, and he's getting 1 full scoop of some chopped alfalfa. The beet pulp and the chopped alfalfa are just for a little bit more fiber, and the alfalfa for a little bit more protein. Also, as a frame of reference, this scooper filled all the way to the brim is about 2 pounds. I know a lot of horse feed, the instructions come in pounds to feed per horse. So this scooper is filled all the way up, is about 2 pounds. I'm also splashing about a 1/4 cup worth, just a little bit of canola oil into his food. It's about yay much. To one, aid in his digestion and just add him a little bit more fat. Old Graham is somewhere between 22 to 24 years old. So we're giving him the canola oil instead of corn oil because the canola oil has a better ratio of omega-3s to omega-6s. The corn oil has a little bit higher omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, which can cause some inflammation. And I'll show you here in a minute. He's got a pretty bad arthritic knee. So anything we can do to cut down on the inflammation is definitely what we're going for. And we're working it up to where we are going to cut down on the sweet feed and increase the equine senior over, like I said, a 1 to 2 week time frame. So we're going to work it to where we're doing 1 scoop of the equine senior, 1 scoop of the beet pulp, 1 scoop of the chopped alfalfa in the morning and in the evening, like I said, and just a small splash of the canola oil in the mornings. And we're going to get to where for a lunchtime feeding, we're just going to do 1 scoop of the equine senior. And that's what we got going with him. Also, like I said, he's got a pretty bad arthritic knee. You can see that left one is pretty swole up. So we are giving him some injections of Adequan. Right now, we are giving it to him once a week for 6 weeks, just to build up his blood concentration levels. And then after that 6 weeks, we're going to drop it down to just giving it to him once a month. We're going to see how that does for him. Now, disclaimer, this little bitty 50 ml bottle is pretty pricey. We're giving him an injection of 5 mils each time. And if you're like me and didn't know, mils and cc's are the same. So 5 cc's, 5 mils. That's what we're giving him. Like I said, once a week for 6 weeks, and then we're going to drop it down to once a month. Oh, and another thing I forgot to mention about him, even though he's old, he does still have teeth. So he is still getting some roughage, some grass, and some hay. So he's not completely on all supplemented diet. He's still getting some roughage throughout the day. Thanks guys, but stay tuned and I will try to give you some updates on his progress and how he's doing and how everything's working out, because we just started this, so only time is going to tell how he takes to it and how he ends up doing. So maybe halfway through the rodeo season, might get back on here and give you an update. Thanks for watching.